To the stories about what he may have said in the past is unconvincing, to say the least. He says he never engaged with racism with intent. With intent. What does that mean? He clearly remembers some of what happened. He should seek those people out and go and apologise to them.
Imagine being the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, publicly declaring you're absolutely delighted about something, only to discover days later that you just celebrated the return of someone who posted what your own government describes as abhorrent content on social media. Now imagine being repeatedly asked on national television whether you'd like to apologise, and instead of just saying sorry, you spend several minutes explaining why it wasn't really your fault, how you regret it but don't apologise for it, and how someone in your team really should have told you about this before you put your foot in it. Welcome to Sir Keir Starmer's absolutely car crash interview on Sunday with Kuenssberg, where the Prime Minister performed linguistic gymnastics worthy of an Olympic gold medal to avoid uttering a simple two-syllable word. Sorry. This is a masterclass in political deflection, blame-shifting, and the art of expressing regret without actually apologizing. Let's dissect this absolute mess. Quick favor. If you're loving what we're doing here at British Mirror, hit that subscribe button and smash the bell icon. Over 94% of you haven't subscribed yet. It's completely free, takes about 2 seconds, and honestly means a world to us. Cheers if you've already done it. Right, back to the show. Sir Keir Starmer has repeatedly declined to apologise for saying he was delighted that Alaa Abd El-Fattah had returned to the UK. Repeatedly declined. Not once, but multiple times throughout the interview. Kuenssberg, to her credit, kept pushing, kept asking variations of the same question, trying to get the Prime Minister to simply acknowledge he'd made a mistake and say sorry. But Sir Keir, trained lawyer that he is, knows the power of words. Apologising admits fault. Apologising creates liability. Apologising gives ammunition to your opponents. So instead of a straightforward apology, we got something far more tortured and revealing about how modern politicians communicate. The Prime Minister said on Sunday that he had been unaware of abhorrent social media posts made by the activist. Unaware. That's the key defense. How can you apologize for celebrating someone's return when you didn't know about their problematic history? It's a reasonable point, actually. Politicians can't be expected to personally research every individual's entire social media history before making statements. That's what advisors are for. That's what the civil service is for. That's what the entire governmental apparatus is supposed to do, provide ministers with the information they need to avoid embarrassing cock-ups. But here's the thing. When you're the Prime Minister and something goes wrong, you're responsible regardless of who specifically failed. That's what leadership means. The buck stops with you. The Labour leader said, "Of course, I regret," his original response, adding that he wasn't very happy that he had not been made aware of the historical post and had raised the issue with the appropriate team. Of course I regret. Not I apologise, but I regret. Those words aren't synonyms, despite how politicians try to use them. Regret is passive. Regret is about feelings. Regret says I wish things had gone differently. Apology is active. Apology is about responsibility. Apology says I was wrong and I'm sorry. Sir Keir very carefully chose regret over apology, and that choice reveals everything about his approach to this controversy. He wasn't very happy that he hadn't been made aware. Again, note the framing. He's not unhappy that he celebrated someone with abhorrent social media posts. He's unhappy that nobody told him about those posts beforehand. The emphasis is entirely on the failure of others rather than his own mistake. And he raised the issue with the appropriate team. Translation. I've had word with whoever was supposed to prevent this embarrassment, and someone's probably in for a rather unpleasant performance review. But the focus remains on systemic failure rather than personal responsibility. Repeatedly asked whether he would like to apologize, and this is where things get properly squirm-inducing. Sir Keir told the program that of course he regrets it, and the point that somebody in government should have known is one is made himself to the appropriate team, because he does think he should have been made aware, and he wasn't made aware. There it is again. I should have been made aware. I wasn't made aware. The passive construction removes agency. Things happened to him rather than him doing things. Information was withheld rather than him failing to ask the right questions. It's a masterclass in deflection, and Kuenssberg wasn't having any of it, which is why she kept pressing. Sir Keir continued, And this is where he comes closest to acknowledging fault without quite getting there, that they are carrying out a review. But to meet your challenge, yes, it's a failing within the system. A failing within the system. Not my failing. Not our failing. A systemic failing. As if the system operates independently of the people running it. As if governmental machinery can fail without the government being responsible. He acknowledged that it shouldn't have happened, and he wasn't very pleased about it when he found out. Hence, they are taking remedial action. Remedial action. That's civil service speak for we're fixing the process so this doesn't happen again. Which is fine and necessary, but still doesn't amount to a personal apology for the original statement. So who is this person whose return caused such political embarrassment? Alaa Abd El-Fattah, an Egyptian-British activist who was granted UK citizenship in December 2021 under former Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson. British citizenship. That's important. Once someone's a British citizen, removing that citizenship is extraordinarily difficult and requires specific legal grounds. You can't just strip someone's citizenship because they posted offensive things on social media a decade ago, however abhorrent those posts might be. The law doesn't work that way, despite what some politicians might wish. His imprisonment for charges of spreading false news was branded a breach of international law by UN investigators, and he was pardoned by Egyptian President Abd El-Fattah El-Sisi in September after years of lobbying by Conservative and Labour governments. Years of lobbying. This wasn't just a Labour initiative. The Conservatives under Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and Rishi Sunak all lobbied for his release. His case was championed across the political spectrum as an example of unjust imprisonment and denial of human rights. The UN said his detention violated international law. This was presented as a clear-cut case of political persecution, which is why his eventual release and return to Britain seemed like an unambiguous victory for human rights advocacy. He flew to the UK on Boxing Day and was reunited with his son who lives in Brighton. Boxing Day. Right in the middle of the festive period when news cycles are slow and politicians can make warm, feel-good statements about human rights victories without much scrutiny. Perfect timing for positive headlines. Except, of course, it wasn't perfect timing at all, because within days someone started digging through Mr. El-Fattah's old social media posts, and what they found was politically explosive. At what point does this takes time become an admission of failure rather than a request for patience? The Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Act that became law in December introduces new criminal offenses and counter-terror-style powers to crack down on smuggling gangs. That sounds impressive until you realize that we already had laws against people smuggling. We already had enforcement powers. The problem has never been lack of legal authority. The problem is lack of political will to use the authority we have, lack of resources devoted to enforcement, and most fundamentally, lack of an effective deterrent that makes crossing the channel in small boats an unattractive option for migrants. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood's November announcement of the most significant changes to our asylum system in modern times also deserves scrutiny. The reforms, inspired by Denmark's system, would make refugee status temporary with reviews every 30 months, and refugees would wait 20 years for permanent settlement instead of 5. That's genuinely tougher than current policy, and it sparked backlash from Labour MPs who called it shameful and accused the government of echoing Farage's rhetoric. But here's the thing, those reforms haven't been introduced in legislation yet. They are just announcements, promises of future action. And even if implemented, they don't address the fundamental problem of people arriving illegally in the first place. The criticism from Labour MPs that these reforms echo Reform UK is also revealing. It shows that Labour is internally divided on immigration, with the progressive wing viewing any enforcement or restriction as right-wing and shameful, whilst the government tries to appear tough to voters who elected them partially on promises to control immigration. That internal tension makes coherent policy impossible. You end up with rhetoric that sounds tough to reassure voters, combined with implementation that's weak because your own backbenchers rebel against anything genuinely restrictive. Conservative leader Keir Starmer's argument that these measures don't go far enough and that leaving the European Convention on Human Rights is necessary represents a tougher end of the political spectrum. Both Conservatives and Reform UK want to quit the ECHR, viewing it as a fundamental obstacle preventing effective immigration control. Labour insists they won't leave but will seek to adjust how immigration cases are interpreted in UK law, which sounds like having your cake and eating it too. You can't remain bound by a treaty whilst interpreting it so differently that you're effectively ignoring it. Either the ECHR constraints matter or they don't. Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy meeting ECHR member states to discuss reforming the treaty to address illegal migration is theatre. The ECHR is not going to fundamentally change its human rights protections because Britain is frustrated with immigration consequences. Other member states don't share Britain's small boat problem to the same degree and have no incentive to weaken human rights protections that they value. This diplomatic outreach will produce nothing of substance whilst allowing Labour to claim they're exploring all options short of actually leaving the treaty. Now let's talk about the one-in, one-out returns deal with France that Farage calls a farce. Under this pilot scheme, people arriving in the UK by small boat can be detained and returned to France in exchange for an equivalent number coming through safe and legal routes. As of mid-December, 193 migrants had been sent back to France and 195 had arrived under the deal. So it's basically a one-to-one exchange with no net reduction in numbers. Worse, there have been cases of migrants being returned to France under the deal, then crossing again and being caught, requiring a second deportation. How exactly is that a deterrent? The scheme's fundamental flaw is obvious. If you get caught crossing illegally, the worst that happens is you're sent back to France, from where you can simply try again. And in exchange for accepting returns, France gets to send equivalent numbers to the UK through official channels. So Britain isn't reducing overall immigration. It's just shuffling people between categories whilst creating the appearance of enforcement. This is what Farage means by calling it a farce. Its immigration policy is theatre rather than substance. The human cost of this policy failure is also worth noting. At least 17 people died attempting the journey last year according to French and UK authorities, though there's no official record of channel fatalities. The International Organization for Migration reports possibly 36 deaths linked to attempts to reach the UK from mainland Europe. These deaths are tragic and preventable.